participating in something like this is part of what this tradition is all about in this state. It's for people to be going to multiple of these events and to be listening to the candidates directly, for the candidates who give you the opportunity to do that, and to make sure that what you do in the end is make the best decision that you can make with your vote, because it's one of the most precious gifts we get as Americans, is to be able to have the opportunity to vote for who our leaders are going to be. Add to it what you all have here in New Hampshire, which is most unique. And you get to decide first. You're the ones who are the presidential wine tasters of America, right? You're the ones who get to cull the field for everybody else. And it's always been, in the more than 100-year history of this primary, important. But I would argue to you that it's getting increasingly important. And given the stakes that are happening both here at home and around the world, you have an extraordinarily important job in 18 days. I'd say this to all of you. I got into this race to tell the truth. I got into this race because I feared that the other folks who were already in the race or seriously contemplating getting in wouldn't tell the truth. Wouldn't tell the truth about what's going on in our country, wouldn't tell the truth about what the challenges are for us and what the opportunities are as well. And I've run this campaign now over the last 9 months, focused on making sure that someone is out there speaking the truth. Believe me, it was not easy in Milwaukee in August, way back then, in the first debate with, I don't know, what we had, 7,000, 8,000 people in that arena, when they asked the question, would you support Donald Trump, even if he was a convicted felon, to be the person on that stage who did not raise my hand? Remember, Nikki Haley raised her hand. Ron DeSantis raised his hand. Mike Pence raised his hand. Tim Scott raised his hand. Doug Burgum raised his hand. I mean, you know, people both here and dearly departed from this race all raised their hands. It was me and Asa were the only two who didn't. And I got booed, as you'll remember that night, pretty vigorously in that arena. And I stood up there and told the truth. And the truth is that we deserve much better than that. The truth is we deserve much better than that. But you know, I'm reminded tonight, because we see now that the United States Supreme Court has taken the question up of whether Donald Trump is qualified for the ballot or not. And I've been asked this a number of times before, and as a lawyer, I can tell you, I think there are good legal arguments as to why he doesn't qualify for the ballot, but I hope the court doesn't kick him off. And the reason that I hope they don't kick him off is because it's our responsibility, not 9 justices of the Supreme Court. Remember what Benjamin Franklin said soon after the Constitution was passed in Philadelphia. A woman approached him on the street in Philadelphia and she said, "Mr. Franklin, what kind of government did you give us?" And Franklin said to her, "A republic, if you can keep it." Well, this is the moment. A republic, if you can keep it. It's not the job of the 9 members of the Supreme Court to keep our republic, it's ours. It's our republic, it's our job. And for better or for worse for all of you, it's your job. Because I will tell you this, if Donald Trump wins Iowa and New Hampshire, he is more likely than not going to be the nominee. So, you know, I hear all the time, I've been coming up to New Hampshire now pretty regularly since 2010, when I had candidates for governor up here and Senate asking me to come up as the brand new governor of New Jersey to campaign for them. And then obviously in the 2016 race, and in races since then in between. And you know, you all love live free or die. You love that slogan. It's everywhere. It's on your license plate. You got those wooden plaques that you can buy in gift stores that say live free or die. We have one of them. Yeah, we have one of them. It's right up on the bookshelf in our kitchen, in our house in Morris County, New Jersey. We've got it. Let me just tell you something. This guy, Donald Trump, has said that he wants to be a dictator. He has said he wants to be your retribution. If you all in New Hampshire support him for a third time, because you voted for him in 16 in the primary, and you voted for him in 20, well, unfortunately, you're saddled with it, babe. You're saddled with it. And you vote for him in 24, live free or die, sounds like bull to me, right? Because this guy doesn't want you to have freedom. This is the guy who said about President Xi in China, he's brilliant, he's great because he rules 1.4 billion people with an iron fist. Imagine that an American president would actually say something like that, would speak admiringly about someone who is a murderous communist dictator, who restricts what his people can hear and what they can say, who sends people based upon their religion to concentration camps. The Uyghur Muslims in China are sent to concentration camps and worked to death. This is a guy he says is brilliant and straight out of central casting. Central casting for what? A horror film, in my view, but to him, this is something that's positive, that's good, to be admired. Putin, too, another guy to be admired. The way you know that you're an opponent of Vladimir Putin and an effective one in Russia is you turn up dead. How about the general who dared to challenge him? And all of a sudden, by some mystery, the guy's plane crashed. You know, the guy who opposed him and then moved to Great Britain and wound up poisoned on a street in Great Britain and dying. This is a guy Trump admires. So, look, it's not easy to be the guy who is saying these things out loud. But the country has to start to listen, and if they don't, we're going to wind up with what we deserve. Well, hell, man, I take Franklin's words seriously. A republic if you can keep it. And that means you got to be willing to fight for it. And what our campaign's been all about is we want to fight at core for what the republic really means, which is freedom and liberty for every citizen, regardless of where you're from, regardless of what you look like, regardless of how you got here. You're an American. You deserve to be treated with respect no matter what. And so my message to all of you tonight as we get down now to this last 2.5 weeks of this primary campaign is what my message has been to you on the TV commercials we're showing right now. What kind of country do you want to be? It's up to you. It's not up to me anymore. In these last 2.5 weeks, I'm not going to say anything new or different. I mean, I could make some stuff up if you like, but I'm not going to do anything new or different. You know where I stand. I've been talking to you directly, eye to eye, face to face, and answering your questions directly for 9 months now. So don't count on me to pull some rabbit out of a hat here to amaze and confuse you in the last 2.5 weeks. It's up to you. You got to decide whether you're going to take this seriously or not. Now, by being here tonight, I know all of you do, because you don't come out here because you had nothing better to do. You're out here because you care about your vote, you care about this country, you care about our party, and you want us to be the best we can be. But for all of us in this room, it's not enough. We have to take this out of this room. You know, one of the great explanations of a phrase that we've all heard that I've ever gotten was from a Lutheran minister who once explained to me the phrase singing to the choir, preaching to the choir. Right, we've all heard that. And we've heard it kind of in a derogatory way, right? Like he's just preaching to the choir. And this minister said to me, I plead guilty to preaching to the choir. He said, I preach to the choir every Sunday. I preach to the choir every day of my ministry. And he said, I preach to the choir so they'll sing. And what he meant was that the word he was sharing, the word of God that he was sharing, wasn't meant to stay inside the church. It was meant to be given to us to go out and sing about it outside of the church, to take those values, those principles, those beliefs, and spread them to our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers, our family. In the same way, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. If you're here, you already care. But I think our job over the next 18 days is to go out and to talk to people about why you feel the way you feel. Whoever you support, whether you leave this town hall tonight supporting me or whether you leave it supporting someone else, I want you to go out there and do something about it. Not just vote, but get others to vote, get others to care, get others to believe. That's when a republic is vital. That's when you can feel the blood running through it. And that's what we have to get this country back to. We are too angry. We are too divided. And anger and division create exhaustion. And an exhausted people can't be a successful people. And so this fight is not about defeating anyone. It's about revitalizing the country. That's what it's about. And that's what my campaign is about. Not about defeating any one person. Yes, I know I have to beat Trump to get there. And I'm going to try to do that. And that's what I've been trying to do. But that's just the first step. Then you got to go beat Biden. Then you got to go and unite the country. That's the challenge. And that's, to me, the exciting part. This is the stuff you have to do. Once you get there, that's the exciting part. And that's what you should be thinking about, with all due respect. Who's the person who can best unite this country? Who's the person who is willing to spend the political capital they'll have to spend to talk to everybody, regardless of where you're from, regardless of whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, regardless whether you're from a city or you're whether from a farm. It doesn't matter. America's America. And that's why I ask in the commercial I'm running, what kind of country do we want to be? That's what this election's about. Look, your choices are pretty obvious. And if you want to continue to be an angry, bitter, backward-looking country, I couldn't recommend anyone to you more than Donald Trump. He is angry, he is bitter, he is backward-looking, and he'll continue to be even worse. If you want to try to turn that page, it's not going to fix itself. We have to fix it. The Supreme Court's not going to come in and save us. We're going to have to save ourselves. And that's what this is all about. And I'm counting on you to do it. I'll do everything I need to do. But ultimately, I can't even vote up here. So I got to count on you to do that part of it. And so what tonight should be all about is what all these things should be about, in my view, which is you get to ask questions. And unlike most of the other town halls you've probably ever been to, I'm going to actually answer your question directly. I'm going to actually tell you exactly what I think. And whether you nod your head when I'm saying it or you shake your head when I'm saying it, I'm going to say it. I'm not going to try to be cute. I'm not going to give one answer here and a different answer on TV. Or from another state, a different answer in that state because they feel a little different than you do. No. You get the same answer every place. And some days you'll like it and some days you won't. But you'll know it. And if you talk to anybody who lived in New Jersey during the 8 years I was governor, I guarantee you they will say, I always knew what he was thinking. I didn't always like it, but I always knew what he was thinking. I didn't always agree with him, but he did what he said he was going to do. And I think that's the most you can ask from a leader. The last piece is to listen. And that's why these town halls are so important too, because after every one of them, I learned something. By the questions you ask, the way you ask them, the intensity you ask them with, because it teaches me about what you really care about and what really drove you to be here tonight. So let's get to that part of it. Enough talking from me, at least about the speech up front. Let's give answers to questions. So it's easy. Raise your hand. I call on you. Someone's going to come to you with a microphone. And the only reason we care about that is because the great people back here from the press, they want to be able to hear your questions and get them. Because if you say something really wild, they want to make sure they can report it on the news and hear it. So who wants to start? Sir, right there in blue shirt. And here comes the microphone around. Someone's got to be the first. That's the way it goes.
You're not going to like this, probably.
That's okay.
Anyhow, my name's Michael Frank, and I'm just over the hill in Spofford. And I have to give you a disclaimer. I'm a lifelong Democrat, but I'm not a plant.
I don't care if you are, so it's all good.
I've spent 20 years in the Air Force, military officer. I've done 2 tours to Iraq, and I'm here to listen to your views. And although I can't vote in the primary, I still can support you and sing to that choir. Okay? So I applaud your passion for preventing the orange-headed person, nameless, from ever having the keys to the White House again. But I also need to know what you're going to do when you're in the Oval Office. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, during these strange times of the world we're in, what will you do to prevent the crises in Ukraine and in the Middle East now from spilling over and becoming a worldwide conflict?
It is one of the most important challenges that will face the next president, because I absolutely believe that what's happening in Ukraine and in the Middle East is connected. And I believe that as Russia continued to lose more and more men, more and more equipment, and it became clear that they weren't going to take Kyiv in a week, as Putin said when it started, that they needed a distraction because the world was too united against them. And so all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here comes Hamas to invade Israel. Now, Hamas is always willing to invade Israel. All they need is a little money and a little encouragement, right? And they got that from Russia's friend in Iran, who is the banker for Hamas and for Hezbollah. And I don't think it's any coincidence that it happened when it did. And it's meant to do exactly what it's done inside our country, which is to distract and divide us from what's going on in Ukraine. And where do we go from here is the question. And how do we prevent it, as you said, from spilling over into a bigger conflict? The only way to do that is to show strength. And I think what's been happening when you look at Ukraine, you could take this all the way back to George W. Bush. And President Bush, who I worked for and who I have great respect for, he blew it when he allowed Putin to go back in and start taking some of that territory back. Then Obama came after him and permitted Crimea to happen and didn't send any defensive weapons to the Ukrainians in response to that. The first part with Bush sent a signal. No, we're willing to let you take a little bit back. Not too much, though. Then when we send no defensive weapons to the Ukrainians, Putin says, Obama doesn't care about these guys. Let's take a little more. Let's get Crimea. Then Trump comes in, and to give him some credit, he started to send them some weaponry. But then he decides to use it to blackmail them to get dirt on Joe Biden, right? Well, if you're Putin, you're saying, well, he didn't really care about them. This is just a means to an end for him. So I'll take a little bit more, and I'll start to assemble troops now on the border. And then Biden comes in, and he says, well, maybe a small incursion wouldn't be so bad. He said that when he first got into office. Well, the problem is that a small incursion is defined differently by Vladimir Putin than it would be by Joe Biden. And so at each step along the way, we showed weakness. And you know this, dictators assess risk. And when you show them weakness, they take while they can. So the first step in avoiding this to becoming broader is to very clearly, as president, state what you are going to do. And what I would say about Ukraine is very simple and direct. I will give them every weapon they need short of nuclear weapons to win the war against Russia. And I'm the only candidate in this race, other than President Biden, who's gone to Ukraine since the war started and met with President Zelensky. And one of the things he said to me very clearly when we met for an hour one day in Kyiv was, please tell every American you speak to, we don't want American troops here, and we won't accept them. He said, we've been occupied by Russia. It was no fun. That's what we're fighting against now. We don't care to be occupied by you either. And he was very honest and very direct. He said, what we need are weapons to defeat them. But we don't want and will not accept American military presence here. So we have a situation here where we can defeat one of our adversaries without a drop of American blood being spilled. That's something we should take advantage of. And so that's why I would be as aggressive as I would be on Ukraine. Now, to move to Israel, look, I'm also the only candidate, except for Joe Biden, who's gone to Israel since the war started there on October 7th. And I have to tell you that what I saw there was breathtaking. I went to one of the kibbutzes that was 600 yards from the Gaza border that was attacked that day. And it's not just the inhumanity that you saw. It was the joy with which they executed on that inhumanity. And what it told me was this is not an enemy that we can negotiate with, because they've made it very clear that what they want is the dissolution of Israel and the killing of every Jew in the world. That is how they define success. Well, we've been here before, haven't we? And I think we need to take people at their word. Everyone said back in the 30s, oh, Hitler doesn't really mean it. Couldn't possibly mean what he's saying. It's just to fire his people up and to become more popular. No, he meant it. And he did the very best he could to execute on it. We need to support Israel to diminish Hamas's military capability so that they're no longer an imminent threat to Israel. Now, here's the tricky part. The tricky part is the ultimate long-term goal here is to isolate Iran. Iran is the problem. And guess what? The Saudis know it. The Emiratis know it. The Qataris know it. They all know that Iran's the problem. So what we should be saying privately to Israel is be careful about when enough is enough. Make the judgment. You're not going to eliminate Hamas completely. That's not going to happen. When do you degrade them enough that they're not an imminent threat so you can tell your people they can go back into their homes? Because if we go beyond that, you're making it impossible for the Saudis to make a deal with the Israelis. And that is key to isolating Iran. Now, we shouldn't be having those conversations publicly because, again, that shows distance between us and Israel. Publicly, we should be saying we're with them, we're going to support them, They're the only democracy in the Middle East. They're our best friend in the Middle East, and we're with them. Privately, we should be saying to them, that's all true, but let's figure out how we thread this needle. Because if at the end of this, what we get is a diminution of Hamas and the ability to get the Saudis back to the table to negotiate a deal with the Israelis that recognizes Israel, that has the home of Islam, the birthplace of Islam, recognize Israel's right to exist, the ball game is over for Iran. There's no one left to side with them. And so that's the way I would approach it as president, is to say to Netanyahu, or whoever is in charge over there, when Netanyahu invariably is going to leave, because if you're the guy who October 7th happened on his watch, you're going. It's just a matter of time. Whoever's left, we're your friends. We're always going to be your friends. We're always going to stand by you, defend you, and support you. But let's be smart about this, because we got a much bigger program to pursue. Because the way to stop the spread is to make Iran irrelevant. Iran is the one who wants to spread conflict through the Middle East, the same way China wants to spread it in Asia, the same way Russia wants to spread it in Europe, and the same way North Korea wants to be a player with China to do it in Asia. Those are the four legs of evil in the world right now. Keep our eye on that ball, show them strength, and let them know that the United States is going to stand by our friends when we say we are. We do that, I think we'll be able to calm the world, and that's what I would intend to do.
Hi, I'm Mickey Clement from Henniker, New Hampshire. I saw you 4 times in 2016, and I voted for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My question is, tell us what you will do about rebuilding the pipelines, rebuilding the wall, stopping DEI, all of this stuff that's going on, defunding police. What will you do?
So let's take all 4 of those in order. I would use the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to make sure that natural gas pipelines get built from Pennsylvania to New England, so that your only choice is not home heating oil to heat your homes in the winter, but that you have natural gas, which is abundant in Pennsylvania and in parts of New York, but very much in Pennsylvania, to get that here. And in terms of the pipeline, whether it's the Keystone pipeline or any of the other ones, I think it's a good thing for us to be importing oil from Canada. Canada's a friend, and we should be having free and open trade on all things with Canada and Mexico. We live in the greatest neighborhood in the world, and we should acknowledge that every day. We were just talking about some pretty ugly neighborhoods. You know, I know you border Canada. I don't think any of you are waking up in the morning going, what's Trudeau doing? Is today the day he's sending the troops down here to New Hampshire? You know, we're not worried about that. But let me tell you, every morning they wake up in Israel worried about that. Every morning they wake up in Ukraine worried about that. Every morning they wake up in Taiwan and South Korea worried about that. And so we need to exploit those relationships and make sure that we're supplying our friends in Europe, us in Canada and Mexico, all of whom have abundant energy, should be supplying it to Europe, not the Russians. Don't make them dependent on the Russians. Let them be dependent on their friends. So that's what I would do on pipelines. On the wall, look, please do not fall for this again, okay? 8 years ago, I was on that stage when he said, I'm going to build a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico's going to pay for it. And I said at the time it was baloney, and people believed him. And he lied. It's that simple. He built 52 miles of new wall in 4 years. Now, if the Mexicans knew that we were only going to build 52 miles, maybe they would have paid for it. And at that pace, for 52 miles, he only needs another 115 years as president to actually finish the wall. I think a wall is a fine idea, but we're going to pay for it. That's the way it goes. It's like you build a fence on your property. You don't go to your neighbor and say, how about half? No, they go, it's your fence on your side, you pay. So I think wall's a fine idea as part of an overall strategy on immigration. It will not fix it by itself, anywhere near fix it by itself. And we can get into immigration in a minute, but that's what I would do on the wall. Third, on DEI, have we not seen over the course of just the last couple of months what a failure it is? I mean, come on. It's ridiculous. All right, people should be chosen based on merit. That's what this country should be all about. And I don't care. It's fine by me. And when I was U.S. Attorney, I remember walking into that office the first time in New Jersey. It's the 5th largest office in the country. And when I went in there for the first couple of days, Mary Pat, I come home and she says, "So what's the office like?" I'm like, "That is the whitest place I've ever seen in my life." So I was focused on trying to make sure that we made the office look more like the state that I represented, which is the most ethnically diverse state in the country. But that doesn't mean for a second I would pick somebody who wasn't competent because of the color of their skin or their ethnicity. But guess what? If you work hard enough, you can find lots of people who are very competent with diversity. That's fine, but we shouldn't have programs that require you to do something like that on any of that stuff. And what it's done, especially to our military, is make them confused about their mission. And it's not right. And I think that's one of the reasons you see recruitment down in the military, because the mission is unclear. So it's ruining our colleges and universities, and we need to just put an end to it and say what we should do is enforce the law. And the law in this country already says that you can't discriminate against people because of their color or their gender or their sexual preference or their ethnic background. And so let people of quality come forward with all those backgrounds and let them be hired. And if they're not hired because of that, then those people should be sued and forced to do the right thing, but not with some government program that says you got to hire somebody only for that reason. That's wrong. So it's DEI, and then what was the last one? There was 4 of them. Yeah, the pipelines, the wall, DEI, and there was a 4th one. Oh, defunding police. Well, okay. I'm a former prosecutor, so I think you know what my answer on this is going to be. I worked with police many, many days of my career, both local police and federal agents. And I think that the diminution of those folks around this country has destroyed the quality of life in every one of our major cities. Every one. And it's wrong. And so what we need to do is to show support for the police, and that's not blind support. Look, I prosecuted police when I was a prosecutor, police who were corrupt. You break the law applies to everyone. But this idea of defunding the police, we see what a folly it is. Who wants to live in San Francisco? Who wants to live in Los Angeles? We have a daughter that lives in Chicago. I fear for her every day, right? New York City is a disaster. And so the idea that somehow, because there are some police who abuse their power, we must defund all the police is a ridiculous notion. And I also think the diminution of the FBI has been awful too, and our party's participated in that in a big way. I know the director of the FBI personally. I know dozens and dozens of FBI agents. Those men and women every day put their lives on the line to try to protect our country. And the fact that you got idiots like Vivek Ramaswamy who are saying he'd fire 75% of the FBI, yeah, just what we need is to fire 75% of the FBI. I mean, this guy really needs to just go back to Harvard, because that's where his attitudes belong, is a place like that. So I would be someone who would appoint an attorney general who would support law enforcement officers who do their jobs. And that's what we need to do. And when I became U.S. Attorney, John Ashcroft was the Attorney General, a really good man. And he said to me, "This is your job, Chris. Enforce the law every day without fear, favor, or partisanship." That would be the direction from me as president to my attorney general and to every law enforcement officer who would work under me as president. Enforce the law every day without fear, favor, or partisanship. We get back to that, our country will be safe again, our country will be secure, and our country will have justice. And that's the job of law enforcement, is to ensure that justice is done. So that's what I would do on those 4 things. Thank you for asking. She's coming right behind you with the microphone. There you go. You got it.
Hi, my name is Len Gleish. I live in Keene, and I also live in New York City. I would like to know what it is that you would do, what you said that the president must do when he comes into office, which is unite the country. What are the things that you would actually do? We're very at each other's throats right now, and somehow we have to resolve that.
Look, I think a lot of the anger in the country is rooted in the fact that government has gotten nothing done for more than a decade. That, like, they take a victory lap when they don't close the government. Somehow that's an extraordinary achievement. That they passed another continuing resolution, not a budget, a continuing resolution not to close the government. I think that the frustration that people feel is rooted in the fact that they don't think government hears them and what they believe the problems are, and they're not solving anything. So they say, what the hell are you doing? And the anger gets higher and higher and higher. So I think the first way to fix it is to start accomplishing some things. Now, how do you do that? I was governor of one of the bluest states in this country. In fact, we haven't elected a Republican to the United States Senate in 51 years. It's the longest streak of any state in America, longer than California, longer than New York, longer than Illinois, us. So it was a tough place to be a conservative Republican governor. But what I decided to do right from the beginning was to reach out to the other side and say to them, look, I went to see the Senate president, who's a Democrat and the head of the Iron Workers Union, so another shy and retiring guy like me. And I went to see him before I even got sworn in, after I was elected. I said to him, Steve, look, we got a choice to make. I said, we can yell and scream at each other and fight and make headlines for 8 years. He said 4 years. I said, no, 8 years. I turned out to be right. I said, or we could put touchdowns in the end zone. I said, now I'm willing to put touchdowns in the end zone. I'm willing to make deals with you to do that. And I promise you that I will always tell you the truth. And if I make a deal, I will always keep my word, even if the deal turns out bad for me. But only if you'll do the same. The 10 seconds he took to decide that question were the most important 10 seconds of my governorship. And he stood up and he put his hand out and he said, let's put touchdowns in the end zone. Now, it wasn't that we didn't fight for 8 years. We had plenty of fights. You know, one morning, a Sunday morning, I went and got the Sunday paper at the bottom of my driveway. I opened it up, and the headline was Sweeney, his name was Steve Sweeney, : I want to punch Christie in the head, was the headline. That was not one of our better days. But we committed to each other that when a deal needed to be made, we would get into the same room with each other, and whoever was being unreasonable, the other one would just say one sentence: touchdowns in the end zone. That was our code word to each other. I tell you that story because that's what you're going to have to do in Washington. We got to get back. Well, look, that's what this whole conversation is about tonight. So if I give that answer about all of them, my wife will throw something at me. But what I'm telling you is, look, we've talked about immigration. Immigration has to be fixed. And the reason it hasn't been fixed is because both parties have dug their heels in and said, we're not going to give in on anything that we don't agree with. My job as president is going to be to bring those two sides together on immigration. And what we need to do, in my view, is we need to go to a merit-based system of immigration. We have 6 million open jobs in this country. 6 million open jobs. Every time we've had that kind of labor stagnation in this country, the way we fixed it is to bring immigrants in to fill those jobs who knew how to do it. That's the way my great-grandfather got here. He was a stonemason in Sicily, and they were building New York City. And in 1901, he came here because they were looking for stonemasons, and he got a ticket to come here. And my grandfather, his son, was born on the boat on the way over, because my great-grandmother was 9 months pregnant. And she says, you wouldn't let him go to America by herself. No chance. So she got on the boat and she gave birth on the boat. And my grandfather told me the proudest day of his life was a day he doesn't even remember. He was 4 days old when they got to Ellis Island. And they made him an American citizen when he showed up there. And we can't let those stories stop. So we need merit-based immigration. We need E-Verify so the employers know, are they hiring someone who's legal or not? So that the employer gets treated fairly and the employee gets treated fairly. But here's the thing. To do that, we're going to have to give the Democrats something because they don't want to do either of those things. So maybe it's something on Dreamers. Maybe it's something on Path to Citizenship. But we're going to have to give something to them if we want to get to a solution. That's what I mean about putting touchdowns in the end zone. How about on debt? Democrats know just as much as we do that $34 trillion in debt is unsustainable. They know it. But they don't want to be the person, like when he said, oh, I have to be the first question, right? It's never comfortable. They don't want to be the first one to say, here's what we need to do to fix the problem. I had the same problem in New Jersey. I inherited an $11 billion debt on a $29 billion budget. And it had to be balanced in 5 months. I came in January. The end of the fiscal year was June. So I went out and made the first move and said, I'm impounding $2 billion in spending under my emergency powers of all kinds. And the Democrats went wild. They called me a dictator and Attila the Hun and all this stuff, including my friend Steve. So the next morning when I got to the State House, we were pulling in, we parked next to each other. We were pulling in at the same time. So he got out of the car and I put my arm around him and I said, hey, I read what you said in the paper this morning that I'm a dictator and you're against all this stuff. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go upstairs, I'm going to revoke the executive order and put the $2 billion in spending back in. And then you guys can figure out how to cut it. And this is politics. He looked at me and said, Governor, hold on. Don't overreact. He goes, that was just stuff we say in the newspaper. What you did was fine. We went ahead and focused on fiscal conservatism. And in the 8 years before I became governor, the budget went up 50%. In the 8 years that I was governor, the budget went up 15%. Less than 2% a year. And every one of those budgets was approved by a Democratic legislature. Do the same thing as President of the United States. We need to go back to pre-COVID levels of spending. That'll take $1 trillion off the deficit immediately. Just go to pre-COVID levels of spending. And then I do zero-based budgeting. That means, and it's what I did in New Jersey, you go in and every department starts at zero, not where they were last year, at zero, and justify every program that you have. That way, I eliminated 832 programs from the New Jersey budget in my first year. And we balanced the budget without raising taxes. Now, that also made me wildly unpopular. My popularity went from 55% to 38%. That's what you have to do as president. You gotta be willing to take that hit. Ultimately, what happened? We got fiscal discipline for the next 7 years because they saw that I was not moving and I wasn't scared by the fact that I had become less popular. And what happened 3 years later? When I was up for re-election, I got 61% of the vote in a blue state. So those are just two examples of the way you put touchdowns in the end zone. Pick big, important, consequential issues. Not the small stuff, the big stuff. Because if you sat in that chair 4 years from now, and I came back up here and I said, guess what? We're 2 years away from a balanced budget, and we've changed the immigration laws, and the crisis at the border is over. If those are the only two things that you thought I accomplished, you'd probably be fairly happy, right? And so don't underestimate people's understanding of how hard this is and go after and grab the big things because they're the things that matter because his questions are going to be occupying me too. So I got to be dealing with that at the same time I'm dealing with this. But that's why I want the job. I mean, this is where some members of my family think I'm crazy. They're like, really? This world, you want to come and take over this at the moment? But this jazzes me. I think that's the challenge I want. We got to return this to being a human business. I'm going to have to spend time with all these people, even if I don't like them. I'm going to have to use the home court advantage of the White House, Camp David, Air Force One, Marine One. Like, I got a lot of advantages and a lot of ways to persuade. And I'll use every one of them. I used to call every state legislator on their birthday in New Jersey, every one, every year. I didn't want to, but it became a thing. And then if I didn't call them first thing in the morning on their birthday, they'd be calling the office. Is the governor okay? Is everything good? Is he mad at me? But the conversation was not just happy birthday. It's just, so what's going on with your family? What stuff are you really interested in that we're working on right now that we're not making any progress on? How can I help you get what you want over the finish line? Is there somebody you need appointed to something that's a reasonable person that I could appoint? Come see me and give me their resume. Like, that's what those conversations lead to. And then when you get that close, it's a lot harder to hate up close. That's right. A lot harder to say no. And look, that takes time and effort, man. It does. But it's the only way we're going to fix this. So that's the way I do it. Next question.
With the U.S. national debt surpassing $34 trillion, a lot of people are worried about the state of the economy, and it's one of the biggest issues that people tend to vote for on polls. And so I was wondering, if you were president and you had theoretical control over the spending of the United States, how might you manipulate the U.S. spending pie chart in order to help fund the projects that you would like to see, while also lessening our spending to help with the debt issue?
Look, part of the answer is what I was saying to him, which is you go back to pre-COVID levels of spending. We increased spending during COVID astronomically, right? Now, we had to in some respects to keep our economy afloat, to keep people who couldn't go to work fed and housed and all the rest of it. Okay, but that's long over. I mean, I know there's still people who are getting COVID now, but it's nowhere near the crisis that it was 2 or 3 years ago. So why are we still spending the same amount of money? It's crazy. So part of the way I would use the powers of the presidency to manipulate that is go back to pre-COVID levels of spending. Second way, though, is that when you go to something like zero-based budgeting, you got to make hard choices. And some of those choices are going to be unpopular. But you got to do it because, think about it, 24 years ago, people here in New Hampshire, probably some of the people in this room, were coming to town hall meetings with George W. Bush and Al Gore, and their biggest argument was over how to spend the surplus, right? Seems like forever ago, but it actually happened. And the fact is that we can get back to that, but it takes discipline to do it. The other reason that we need to do it, and the way it affects our economy, is interest rates. Because the more money we borrow, the more pressure we put on that credit market, the more those interest rates are going to continue to stay high. And that prevents people from buying homes, it prevents them buying cars, borrowing money to increase their business. And so the other way it helps the economy to stop spending as much is when we start borrowing less, it creates more space in the credit markets for you to borrow, to do what you think you need to do. Buy a home, buy a car, start a business, increase the size of your business. All that will add to economic growth in this country and make the country more prosperous and make each individual have the potential to be more prosperous. But just remember that some of the stuff I'm going to do, you're not going to like, right? There's going to be a program I'm going to eliminate. You're going to go, whoa, 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 not that one. You know, take this one over here. I like this one, right? So when you do this, you've got to understand that part of it is you're just going to not like some of the stuff I do. But as long as I remain consistent with the goal that you want me to reach, which is to stop adding to these trillions in debt, that ultimately, it's not even going to be your problem. It's going to be your children's problem. We have to stop doing that because ultimately people are going to stop lending to us. And then we're going to have an economy that's going to collapse. So there'll be a lot of hard choices to make. But we haven't made any of those hard choices now for 20 years. And now we're paying the piper for that. And, you know, it's like, you know, whenever you get loaded and have a hangover, you know, the hangover stinks. We're going to be in the hangover stage. And that's what we need to do. If you like the party, you know, you got to live with the hangover. And we're going to have to live with the hangover of cutting spending and eliminating some of these programs that might have merit to them, but that we just can't afford. So that's the way I would go about doing it. All right. Yes, sir.
My name's George Flores, and I've been a resident of the state for 38 years now. And I agree with Sweeney. I was actually a union rep in Vermont for 10 years. So my question is, my company just closed down last month. We were in business for over 60 years. I'm still there, but we laid off 60 employees. We were probably one of the top paying jobs in the state. And what closes is the competition from China. We're a paper manufacturing company, and we just can't compete with them. My boss, the owner, he's from Canada, and we're looking at new business to reopen it in the summertime. So the question is, what are you going to do to balance this trade with China? We're losing many jobs. Back in the early 93 to 2000, when I was doing union work and working with the governors and stuff in Vermont, we saved a lot of jobs. That's kind of like going by the wayside now. So that's my question.
Sure. Look, the problem that we've put ourselves in with China is that our businesses have made the decision to go over there because labor is cheaper, right? And costs are cheaper. And so a lot of businesses have moved over there, and a lot of things that used to be manufactured here are being manufactured there because they at least thought when they did it that they were going to be able to do it more cheaply. They're finding out now that not so much, as China starts squeezing them because of their own economic problems. That's why I think this is a moment of opportunity for us. China's GDP, 66% of ours. They've got a problem now. We now need to take advantage of it. And part of what we need to do is to bring back manufacturing that's essential to national security and public health. What we learned during COVID was much of what we needed from a public health perspective was manufactured in China. When we couldn't get masks and we couldn't get gloves and we couldn't get gowns and certain pharmaceuticals because they were all manufactured over there, we got a rude awakening because they weren't giving it to us. Or if they were giving it to us, they were selling it to us at an exorbitant price that they were absolutely just soaking us. So let's learn from that experience and learn at a time when they need us more than we need them. And right now, believe it or not, they need us more than we need them because their economy is aging out. And they don't bring immigrants to China. And they had that one-child policy for a long time. Now they don't have people to replace their aging workforce. So they need our help. So now's the time for us to negotiate different deals with them in ways where we can say, no new American investments going over there unless you change some of these rules that affect companies like yours, technology, in terms of the way they steal our intellectual property. Those are two of the biggest problems that China presents to us, is unfair competition and stealing of our intellectual property. You know the rules over there. If you have a new invention here in the US and your company's thriving, and now you decide, well, there's 1.4 billion people over there, we want to go and expand our business to China, they say, sure, but you have to give us your technology. And then lo and behold, what happens is 6 months later, there's a Chinese company selling your technology. That's got to stop. And now that we have the leverage to do it, we should. And they're in trouble. He didn't come to San Francisco last month because he wanted to see the Golden Gate Bridge. He came because there were American businessmen and women gathered in San Francisco, and he needed to impress upon them how much he wanted them to continue to invest. Well, we now need to use that hunger to our advantage. They used it on us. It's time for us to turn it around, and that's what I would do as president, and make real deals that we can enforce. You know, Trump made this trade deal with China, said it was the greatest deal of all time, right? Just on agriculture alone, we could go through all of them. It's underperformed on everything. But the Chinese have only bought 40% of what they said they would buy from our farmers under this trade deal. So a trade deal on paper is nothing if you don't enforce it. And so we have that moment, we need to have it enforced, and we need to have somebody who knows how to do these things. And it's pretty clear that running the biggest government the world's ever known is different than running some golf courses. Yes, sir, right there. I'll come over to you.
Hi, Governor. How are
Hey,
you?
good.
I'd like to take a moment, and you mentioned something about human business before, and I'd like to take a moment and tell you about someone named Jenna. Jenna grew up in what you might call a normal household. She had lots of friends. She was successful in school. By all accounts, she had the world in front of her. That changed when she was prescribed prescription pain medication, and it started her on a 6-year struggle of addiction. She wanted so badly to get better. And for a while, she was on a better path. In one conversation, she said to her mother, "When I get out of treatment, me and you, we're going to go out, we're going to help people." That was her promise. She's tried so hard to realize that dream, but she lost her struggle with addiction. My little sister was 26 years old when she died. Our family picked themselves up, joined with the community, and we worked to create a new model that challenges the stale, failing national model for substance use. And we are a pilot for the state of Vermont right now as well. But things are still bleak. We put up a memorial wall in one of our buildings, and it started with just a picture of Jenna. And over time, other people in the community in this small town of Vermont began to put up pictures as well. That wall should not have filled up so quickly. And it continues to do so. There's so many of them now. We envisioned this memorial as a wall with a few photos on it, but the tragedy of it is there's so many of them that we have to stack them up tightly, and they themselves have become a wall, brick by brick and frame by frame, this wall of loss, and yet we continue to see the deaths rise, and we build that wall a bit more, and collectively as a society, we go on with our day. We have an epidemic that has killed so many people that it has single-handedly brought down our country's life expectancy, and it's an asterisk in our national conversation. I'm grateful for your plan. I'm grateful that you're talking about this. You and Doug and Catherine Bergen were the only ones that are talking about this. But the front of this war is everywhere, and every time we speak out about it, every time we endeavor to help stem the flow, we are moving the line forward, and we can't solve the crisis until we're talking about it more. So you do that, and I'm grateful. That's why I drive 3 hours, and I've done it 3 times to see you so far this campaign. But my question to you is, how do we move this issue to the forefront so we're having a national conversation about it, just like we are about Ukraine and the border and climate change? What will you do to make this a prime issue of your professional career? Thank you.
Well, first, thank you for coming again. This has been, as you probably know, a passion of mine since I was 30 years old. When I was 30 years old, I got recruited to join the board of a substance abuse center sponsored by the Catholic Church in New Jersey called Daytop Village, which was particularly for young people, for people 18 and younger who had substance abuse disorder. And so 30 years ago, I was 30 years old 31 years ago. So it was a long time ago. And what I learned from being there that I didn't understand before was that this is a disease. It is not a moral failing. And for most people, after the first time they take a drug, it's not a choice. And first thing that a president needs to do is to make that clear to the American people, that this is like heart disease, cancer, diabetes. It is a disease that kills people, that has some contribution from conduct choices, as do heart disease and cancer and diabetes too, but is a disease that is very, very hard to treat, and that people shouldn't be stigmatized. Families shouldn't be stigmatized because a member of their family has this disease any more than someone who has any of those diseases we talked about. And the reason I think a president can change that national conversation is because we've seen members of the first family do that at times. You go back to Betty Ford, and she changed the national conversation on 2 issues in the 2.5 years that her husband was president. She was open and public about her breast cancer, the mastectomy she had, the treatment she had to have, and it gave women license to talk about it. And it changed the entire way we've approached treating breast cancer since then. And all the advances that have been made, I think, draw a line directly back to Betty Ford. And she did the same thing on alcoholism. And to admit, as the First Lady of the United States, that you're an alcoholic, and then to go and spend the rest of her life opening her own treatment center, talking about those issues. She used the platform she had to do that. I've spoken many times about later in my life, the dear friend of mine, my law school classmate, who fell victim to the same thing that your sister did. He started on prescription painkiller because he hurt his back. And he's in the middle of a trial and he couldn't stop. So he went and got Percocet. And he got completely addicted and went on a 10-year odyssey of in and out of treatment centers. He was married to a physician, 3 beautiful daughters, partner in a major law firm. Every way you would define success, people would look at him and say he was successful. And his life ended in a motel room by himself with an empty bottle of Percocet and an empty quart of vodka at 50 years old. And left 3 daughters and a wife. And I went to his funeral as the governor, my law school classmate, who I knew was a good man, who had fallen victim to this. We lost 110,000 people, as you know, last year in this country to overdose. It's the leading killer among 18 to 34-year-old men. This is an epidemic. It's the only job I ever accepted from Trump. He asked me to chair his national commission on opioids and drug abuse, and I did. And what I would do is what he didn't do. I would take that report, which I put together with Governor Baker from Massachusetts and Governor Cooper from North Carolina and Patrick Kennedy, who's in recovery himself, and we'll implement those programs. We need to understand that this is not a problem we're going to arrest our way out of. Addicts who we arrest just go to jail as addicts and come out as addicts. The people who belong in jail are the people who profit from this. And I would continue to prosecute those people in jail. One of the things that I think we need to do on the federal level that I did in New Jersey was when we did criminal justice reform, we lowered our prison population pretty significantly, enough that we could close 2 state prisons. So I closed one of them, but the other one I converted into a drug treatment prison. Because so many of the people who go into jail are addicted. And we have this fiction that they don't get drugs in jail. Of course they do. They can get anything they want in jail. It's the way it works. And so what we did was, for folks who had a demonstrated addiction problem to drugs or alcohol, in the last year of their sentence, they got transferred to the drug treatment prison, and they started to get treatment then. And if it was an opioid situation, they would start to get medication-assisted treatment. By the end of their year there, we would qualify for them for Medicaid if they qualified before they left, give them their Medicaid card, and give them their prescriptions for their first 3 months of medication-assisted treatment, so that when they left, they could continue their treatment without all the bumps that happen for someone who comes out of prison. That program has reduced recidivism by those folks by 40%. Every one of those lives is a gift from God that deserves to be saved. And so the way I would approach this is to talk about it just the way I spoke about it now, and to do it regularly as president, and to go and visit treatment centers as president, and let people know that if a president can come and stand here, you should have one of these in your neighborhood. If a president's willing to say it's a disease, not a moral failing, then maybe people will listen. And what we need to understand is that this one kills indiscriminately. It doesn't matter what your race is, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic status, your educational background. It kills everyone. And that's why I think we actually have a chance to do it, because it's not isolated in one particular population. It's everywhere. And so I've spent the last 31 years of my life working on this, with some success and some personal failure. That friend of mine, when he was in one of his places of sobriety, he had lost his job at the law firm. And so I hired him in state government and said, okay, we're gonna get you back on the road here, start this job, get your resume re-going, and then stay here for as long as you like until you're ready to go and get another job that you want. So I hired him, and about 7 months later, his boss asked for a meeting with me. He came to see me and he said, look, I found your friend asleep at his desk, and when I opened the drawer, he had an empty half gallon of vodka in his bottom left-hand drawer. What do you want me to do? And I said, fire him. Nothing more I can do for him. Fire him. So he went back and fired him. And my friend called me and said, I can't believe you had me fired. And I said to him, we have to deal with this. And so, you know, when I got the call on that Sunday morning that he was dead, I certainly also felt a decent amount of guilt about it too. Because you wonder to yourself, how did I fail him? What more could I have done? Families are suffering through that every day in this country, every day. And we need to try to alleviate that suffering. And the way to do it is to make them feel like they're not alone. And they don't have to hide the problem any more than they would hide cancer or diabetes or heart disease. So, you know, I say this all the time. My mother was an addict. She was addicted to nicotine. She started smoking when she was 16 years old, which was 1948. When not only didn't they say smoking was bad for you, they said it was good for you, gave you energy, made you more active and athletic, right? I mean, all the BS they were selling back then. My mother got addicted and she tried everything to quit. But she smoked over a pack a day, every day for 55 years. And at 71 years old, when she inevitably got lung cancer, that had spread to her brain, her liver, and her kidney, we lost her inside 4 months from the diagnosis. And no one said to me she's getting what she deserves. She knew smoking was bad for her. She's getting what she deserved. No one said that to me. But would I have told anybody about my mother if she was a heroin addict? And would they have come and helped her? Would they have consoled her? I don't think so. And it's because we make a differentiation between those two, and we've got to stop doing that. So I can't express to you enough how badly I feel about your loss and your family's loss. But the only way that I can express it is by doing something about it. And you can count on the fact that if I'm president, I will.
Governor, thank you for being here. Mrs. Christie, thank you for being here. I've been a big fan of yours since 2009. I think everybody knows that you were a governor. I don't think you get the credit you deserve for being a federal prosecutor. And I think that's actually more impressive. You speak the truth in this campaign, and you have made the Republican Party better. And I think you've made the country better. And you don't have to win the New Hampshire primary for that to be true. You don't even have to stay in the race through the primary for that to be true. You have made the party better, and you have made the country better. What I'm worried about is that Trump will win the New Hampshire primary. And what gives me a great deal of anxiety is that you and Governor Haley appeal to the same people. And so my question to you is, do you think that my anxiety about that is unfounded?
No, I have the same anxiety. Look, Nikki and I do appeal to some of the same people. But there are a lot of people who support me who wouldn't support her because she's not speaking out against Donald Trump. Because she says, he was the right president at the right time. Because she said yesterday again that she'd pardon him if she became president. Because she says that he deserved a break after January 6th. Because she won't say that she would refuse the vice presidency if he offered it to her. And so a lot of the people who are passionately supporting me in this state and around the country say, if you leave the race, I'm not voting for Nikki Haley. I don't know who they're going to vote for because there's no one else saying what I'm saying either. Certainly Ron DeSantis isn't saying it. And Vivek Ramaswamy's not saying it, so that's all that's left. And so I understand why you'd be concerned about it. What I can tell you is this. I've made a commitment to tell the truth in this race, and I've made a commitment right at the beginning that if there ever became a moment where I felt like there wasn't a path for me to win, that I'd get out. But that has nothing to do with Nikki Haley. That has to do with what I can accomplish or not accomplish. And also, I wouldn't support her at the moment, even if I did get out, because of what she's failed to do. You know, she knows. You know, and this is why you'll remember, many of you, that I defended her in the 4th debate. If you watched, Vivek came after her, right? Said she wasn't as smart as his 3-year-old son. Now look, I've known her for 13 years. This is a really smart, accomplished woman. And that's why I defended her, because that's the way I was raised. Like, you know, someone's getting picked on unfairly, and you have the ability to stand up and stop it, you stand up and stop it. And the press was so cynical afterwards. They were like, what was your motivation? Did you guys have a deal? I'm like, my motivation was I'm a decent human being. I know hard for you to believe, but like, that was my motivation. So I know she's smart, and that's why I defended her. But it's also why I'm unhappy with her, because she knows better. She worked for him. She knows what he's like. And she knows what he'd be like as president a second time. She knows better. And she won't say these things because she's playing politics with it. She doesn't want to offend people who are willing to vote for Trump. And not even that she thinks those people will vote for her this time. She's worried about next time. Because guess what? Next time, there's not going to be Trump. Either he's going to get elected and then he's term limited, or he's going to lose again. And even at that point, I think even he may go away, at least a little bit. So she's thinking about the next time. And if I don't offend any of these Trump voters, maybe they'll like me the next time. We have a crisis in this country now. Our republic is at stake now. And so I appreciate your support. I appreciate your kind words about me. And I will tell you this, I will make my decisions about this race based upon what I believe in my heart I can accomplish or not accomplish. But I will never again support someone who I don't believe in. I did that 8 years ago. Trump was going to win after he won here and won South Carolina. I looked at it. I sat with Mary Pat. I said, he's going to be the nominee. I don't want Hillary Clinton to be president. We've known Trump at that point for 15 years. I could try to make him a better candidate and a better president, so I'm going to go with him. I ran against him. I didn't want him to be president, but I'm like, okay, well, this is the choice it's going to be. I made a political judgment to support somebody, not a merit-based judgment to support someone. It was a mistake then, and it would be a mistake now to do that. And you get to make that mistake once. Because you make it once, people say, okay, well, he made a mistake, we forgive him. You make it a second time, they go, it wasn't a mistake. This is a pattern now. So I don't disagree with the premise of your question, that we share some similar supporters, because we have similar backgrounds, and for some reason people think, we agree on Ukraine, we agree on Israel, so there's some things that we agree on. But the most important issue in this race is Donald Trump. There is no more important issue than that. Because if we don't defeat him, then all the things we're talking about here tonight are not going to get done. So if I ever did get out of this race, whether it's before New Hampshire, after South Carolina, after Michigan, whenever it could be, whenever I came to the conclusion that I didn't see a path to me winning, she has to earn my support by what comes out of her mouth and what's in her heart, not just because she's the only one left standing against Donald Trump. Because what I learned from the Trump-Clinton race was picking between two bad alternatives doesn't make the one you pick good. Just means you picked the one you thought was less bad. I've done that once. I'm not doing it again. And by the way, on the prosecutor thing, I'll just tell you, you're right. It was the best job I've ever had in my life. I loved being governor, but the best job I ever had was being U.S. attorney for 7 years, because every morning the only thing you had to do was wake up and figure out, how do you make justice happen? That's a pretty damn good job, and I loved doing it for 7 years. It was great. My man, she's going to come up behind you.
Thank you, Governor Christie.
Quinn, good to see you.
Good to see you too. First and foremost, I just want to say I really appreciate that you were always willing to take the hard questions, and so thank you for that. President Biden held a speech today on the eve of January 6th, and here's a part of what he said. Donald Trump's campaign is about him, not America, not you. Donald Trump's campaign is obsessed with the past, not the future. He's willing to sacrifice our democracy, put himself in power. Do you agree with President Biden? Thank you so much.
Sounds like I could have written it. Yeah, I do. I do. And you know, you've asked me questions before where I've agreed with Biden when he deserves credit, like when he went to Israel right after the war started. That was a courageous thing to do and a smart thing to do. And I analogized it to when Tony Blair came over here right after September 11th. And you all who were old enough to remember that may remember him sitting up in the gallery in the House of Representatives in a black suit with a black tie, mourning the loss of his allies' citizens. And I thought to myself, what an amazing moment of leadership and friendship. And I think when Joe Biden went to Israel right after they had been attacked and stood with the Israeli government, it was a great moment of leadership by President Biden. He deserves credit for it. There's lots, as you know, that I disagree with him on, but when he's right, he's right. And on that speech, at least that section that you read to me, yeah, I would have said that. I probably have come close to saying that over the course of the last, number of months. And the fact is that points out the way I would act in response to your question, right? You just had the first test. Now, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that if this were at DeSantis town hall, or this were a Haley town hall, he probably wouldn't have gotten to ask that question, for sure, because they would have screened him beforehand, and they already know he's a bit of a pain in the ass, so she wouldn't have called on him, right? No, that's what they think, not what I think. I called on him, knowing what I was gonna get, or at least suspecting what I was gonna get. But when a Democrat deserves credit, I give them to them. In 2012, when Hurricane Sandy hit my state, it was 8 days before the presidential election. I know that. And I knew Barack Obama was going to want to come and visit. And my staff said to me, you gotta be careful. You were the keynote speaker for Mitt Romney at the convention. You're his biggest surrogate. You've raised more money for Mitt Romney than anybody else in America. And now, 8 days before the election, Obama's going to come here. And I said, yeah, and we're going to welcome him. Because our state just sustained the second worst hurricane in the history of this country. We lost 346,000 homes in 24 hours. And the President of the United States wants to come and see it and help us. I'm going to be there to welcome him. And I did. No, I didn't hug him, by the way, wise ass. I shook his hand. And angry, hostile members of my own party called it a hug because I also gave him credit for having done the right thing and not looking at me and saying, well, he's the governor who's supporting Romney and has been running around the country beating the bejesus out of me. Why should I go to New Jersey and help them? No, he didn't do that. He got on the plane and came. And he could have been just as angry with me as I was with him about his policies, but he put his job first, and I was going to put my job first. And, at the end of the day, that's what we take an oath to do. And so when Biden does something good, I'm going to say he does it good. When he does it bad, I'm going to say that too. And we should be judged on the totality of what we do. And I wouldn't do anything different if I had to do it again in Sandy. Now I'll show you. You stand up because we're friends now, okay? I want to show you exactly what it was between me and Obama.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
That is no hug. No. I think he cared about the fact that my state had been destroyed and he wanted to come and see it for himself. Now, did he know by coming there that he would look like a bipartisan leader? Yeah, but let me tell you another part of the story that doesn't get talked about much. Storm happens Monday and Monday night. Tuesday morning, Obama calls and says, I'd like to come tomorrow. Is that okay? I say, yes, Mr. President. Where do you want to meet? Atlantic City Airport. Great, I'll meet you there. Our staffs will work on the details. Great. Right after I got off the phone with Obama, I called Romney. And I said, Mitt, I just need you to know, Obama's coming tomorrow. Mitt said, I figured he would. I said, you come on Friday. Come with a check for the Victims Relief Fund from your rich guy, write a check. Come with a check, I'll give you the same tour that I give to Obama. And you could say, when you get elected president next Tuesday, you wanted to make sure you were 100% ready to deal with the crisis and the rebuilding of the state. And he said, I'll think about it. I said, good. He never came. Okay, so that was his choice. But I was ready to do exactly the same thing with Mitt Romney that I did with Barack Obama. Mitt Romney and his team chose not to do it. Stupid, stupid decision, okay? But so my view on it was I gave everybody an equal opportunity to look good. And at the same time, it was helping my state, which was on its back, no power in 2/3 of the state, 346,000 homes destroyed, no operating water treatment or wastewater treatment plants, every major highway obstructed, not one school in the state open, 61 gas stations in the entire state of 9 million people working. You know what? President of the United States says, I want to come and help. Amen, baby. You come and help because we need plenty of help. So, you wouldn't in a Haley or DeSantis town hall gotten a compliment about Biden. They would have said something like, he's emphasizing the wrong thing. He's playing on people's emotions of January 6th and it's wrong. And I've heard DeSantis say that that most of those people on January 6th were tourists. Now look, I've been a tourist on Capitol Hill, and I never, to get into the Capitol, took the shield of a Capitol Hill police officer, used it to bust a window and climb through. I just went through the door and went through the metal detectors, So, this is the nonsense that they're willing to go through to bend the knee to Trump. And, we saw Tom Emmer, the number 3 leader in the House of Representatives, came out yesterday and endorsed Donald Trump for president. I've known Tom Emmer for 14 years. I campaigned for him in 2010 when he was running for governor of Minnesota. And he's a really good man. And I have no idea what he's doing. He ran for Speaker of the House, and Trump sent out a social media post to everybody saying, don't vote for Tom Emmer. He's an awful human being. Emmer doesn't win. Like 2 months later, Emmer's endorsing him. And you know what Trump said in the New York Times today? He said, of course he endorsed me. They all bend the knee. And because they care more about having the title than they care about doing the job. Because they're afraid that Trump will sponsor someone to primary them. Because they care about being called congressman. Let me just make something clear to all of you. I've already had plenty of great titles. I've been U.S. attorney, I've been governor, husband, father, son. I got enough titles to last me the rest of my life. I am not selling my soul to get another one. And Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis are willing to sell their soul to get another title or curry some favor with people. That's their choice. My choice is different. And you should think about who you want sitting behind the desk in the Oval Office making those decisions. Someone who's willing to sell their soul, or someone who's willing to stand up and take the heat that I took in 2012 because I was decent to the President of the United States of America when he came to try to help my state. I wouldn't do anything different if I knew everything I know about the abuse I've taken about that for the last 11 years. If I knew all of it before I picked up the phone from Obama, I would have still said, yes, sir, Mr. President, where do you want me to be? Because that's what a patriot does, and that's what someone who takes an oath to serve people, not party, does. And that's what I do as president.
Margaret Fitzgerald, and I know you've touched on this a little bit already, but I just wanted to ask you, we're in an age with such a lack of bipartisan cooperation. So I was wondering, how do you feel with your experience? How do you feel like this has affected the country? Like, what are some of the negative effects, and how do you plan to make a dent in this so that we can get stuff done?
Well, look, the effect on the country is anger and division and hopelessness. Right? That's what it is, and that's what everybody feels. And anger, division, and hopelessness leads to exhaustion. And exhaustion leads to inaction and complacency. And this feeling that I can't do anything to change it. And that's destructive to a republic. And so that's what it does. I've talked about all the things that I would do to try to make the country more bipartisan and together, so I won't repeat all those things. But what I will say to you is that in the end, we cannot cave to exhaustion. I'm not saying we're not right to feel exhausted. Probably are, after everything the country's been through the last number of years. But we can't give into it. You know, there's that old saying, right, that like, you know, a small group of people determined to make a change can change the world. And the question is, how do you know? And the answer is because it's the only thing that ever has. It's the only thing that ever has. And it can start here. It can start here in this state in 18 days. Or it can't. And that's up to you. Like in the end, I really am very content with the idea that I can't do any more than I'm doing. I'm here every week. I'm out 3-4 nights a week here. Then when I'm not here, I'm out in all these other states raising money so I can afford to come here, right? And there's nothing more I could do. And I absolutely feel invigorated by it because I'm trying to make a difference in my country. And now all of you have to decide. You've made one decision already just by showing up. You know, as Woody Allen said, like 90% of life is showing up. I mean, it is. It's about showing up. So you've made part of the decision already. Now the question is, what more do you want to do? What more are you willing to do? Whoever you believe in, it's me or whether it's somebody else, get out there and try to make sure that people know why. And in this state, people are pretty engaged. So you won't have a hard time getting people to talk about it, especially, God, we're going to be inundating you people over the next 18 days with TV commercials and appearances and all the rest of that. And you can be ready to be rid of us by January 23rd. But up until that time, you got to decide what role you want to play. And beyond this, for someone like you, of your age, as compared to mine, you got a lot of road ahead of you. And you decide what kind of American you want to be and what you want this country to be. And don't think it's beyond your capacity to make it that way. You can be part of it. You can be part of making it that way. So I feel really, really empowered and invigorated by the challenge. And there are days when it is a bit of a bummer, no doubt. But nobody ever said it was going to be easy. And this country isn't designed to be easy. It's designed to be hard. But I think that's why it's lasted 250 years. As the freest, richest, bravest, strongest country the world's ever seen. Now we got to see if we can keep it. See, because for me, I've already had a great American life. I'm 61 years old. More of my life is in the rearview mirror than through the windshield. And so I've had a great life already. No matter what happens between now and then, I'll look back on the life I've had and feel really, really good. I want you to feel the same way 40 years from now. About, I'm guessing. Right? 41? All right. So, okay, call it 43. But that's what I want you to be able to feel. I want you to be able to look back on it and say, man, not only did I have a good life personally, but I contributed to making this country a better place. Because maybe at that point you'll have children and maybe you'll be worried about what the kind of country you're going to leave them. Because that's what I think about now. And that's part of what motivates me to do what I do too. And I think if you talk that way, the country will listen and hear you. And maybe it'll inspire people to their better angels rather than the anger and the division and the exhaustion that we have now. That's at least my hope. That's what we're going to try to do. All right, yes, ma'am. She's got the microphone right behind you.
Thank you so much for coming here and giving such thorough answers to the questions. There are many issues where when you talk to people, there's a whole continuum of where people fall out on them. Where is your line in the sand on the abortion issue?
Well, let me first start by telling you that I'm pro-life personally, and I've always believed that every life was a precious gift from God. And in the same way that, I answered his question, I think that every life is a gift and deserves to be saved. Now, that's my personal opinion. Emotional and difficult issues abound in this race, but none more emotional or difficult than this one. None more personal. For 50 years, conservatives have said, Washington, D.C. shouldn't be making these decisions. Washington, D.C. took these decisions away from the people, and that's wrong. People should make these decisions. That's what conservatives have said. I've said it. Now, all of a sudden, we get the Dobbs decision from the Supreme Court, and they say, you know what? You're right. It's not the federal government's job. And now we got a bunch of people in my party and in the other one who are saying we should have some national law on abortion. And I want to make it really clear. If I were president of the United States, I would not sign any ban on abortion at the national level. I believe that the states should make these decisions and the people of the state should make these decisions. So here in New Hampshire, you should be able to vote on what the law should be. And in New Jersey, they should be able to do that. And in Wyoming, they should be able to do that. And yeah, we're going to wind up with different laws about abortion in different states. It's no tragedy, okay? I would much rather have you making that decision than these jokers in Washington, D.C. Because now it's not the Supreme Court anymore, it's Congress. And every time Congress changes, the law will change. So when the Democrats have it and they're in control, we'll have, like we have in New Jersey where the Democrats are all in control now, abortion up to 9 months. Then you'll get a set of Republicans who'll be in charge, and then you'll have a 6-week ban on abortion. And it'll go like this. And how are women in this country supposed to be able to make these decisions when the laws change back and forth depending on the parties? And the fact of the matter is that I don't even know these guys could figure it out. I mean, it's the same jokers who took 3 weeks to pick a speaker after they fired one. You'd think once you fire somebody, you'd have somebody else in mind, right? Or they held up 400 military promotions over this issue. When those men and women earned those promotions, the people in uniform needed that leadership, and they held that up over this issue. You want to put the issue of life in their hands? No thanks. So I think as president, you need to make it very clear. This is a state issue, and the people of those states should make the decision. And I'm willing to live with whatever decision you make. Look, in New Jersey, it's 9 months. That offends me, personally. Okay? I got 2 choices. Work to try to change the law, or move. But if it's a national law, where am I moving? I'm not going to Canada. No, I have nothing against Canada, but I don't want to live there. At least if the individual states decide, and it is the most important issue to you, and your state laws, you can't change them and they bother you, you can move to a place that has laws that are more agreeable to you. That's why I trust people to make this decision, not politicians. And remember, I didn't trust judges to make it either. I want people to make these decisions. And remember in this race, Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley have both said they would sign a 6-week ban. Now, Nikki doesn't say that when she's in New Hampshire. When she's in New Hampshire, she says, I want to be compassionate. We need to care about people. and let people know that we care about them. I don't know what that means. But when she goes to Iowa in front of the evangelicals, she says, I'll sign a 6-week ban. So I don't know what she'd do, and neither do you, and that should worry you, in my opinion. Ron tells you what he'll do. He's signing a 6-week ban. He signed it in Florida, and something interesting happened in Florida today, didn't it? They secured enough signatures to put the issue of abortion on the ballot in Florida this November to overturn the law that he signed. Now, I don't know what the result of that is going to be, but this is the experiment in democracy I want. There are enough people in Florida who didn't like the law he signed, so they signed a petition to get it on the ballot. And now everyone's going to get to vote in Florida. All of them. And then we're going to see where it lands. And wherever it lands, it lands. But at least the people got to decide. That's what I want to happen all across the country. That's where I am on that issue. All right. I got the signal for last question, so I will go to you right there. And they're coming around with the microphone.
So you said last night that if it came down to a Biden-Trump ticket, you would abstain from voting. We both know that only one of those candidates wants to demolish democracy. We both also know that Jersey is a blue state and it's probably going to vote for Biden if it's on the,
Yeah, it will vote for Biden, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
Especially if Trump's the nominee.
But if you were the single deciding vote in that election, it's a hard if.
I'd vote for me.
You also said you wouldn't do that last night.
Last night they didn't say I'd be the single deciding vote. They just said I would be writing myself in a fit of ego.
If you had that kind of choice, how can you say that you stand for the best interests of the American people and still abstain?
Yeah, here's why. Because I think there's little difference between someone who is temperamentally unfit for the presidency, which I believe Trump is, and someone who I think is now physically and mentally unfit for the presidency, which I think Biden is. And so I can't answer a hypothetical like if I had the deciding vote. I mean, that one's just a ridiculous question with all due respect, because I'll never have the deciding vote. I mean, if I had the deciding vote, if I did, I'd have to make a choice. But I don't have the deciding vote, and I don't have to settle for one of those two. And also what I said last night was, maybe there's going to be a third-party candidate. I think there will be if it's those two. From everything I've read about the No Labels effort, they've said they will put a candidate on the ballot if it's Trump and Biden. And so there may be a third choice to pick from. I can tell you this, my mentor, when I was elected governor, the National Governors Association assigns you a mentor. My mentor governor was the governor of West Virginia, Joe Manchin. I got to know him really, really well. Let me tell you, Joe Manchin would be a really good president. And, I like him a lot on a personal level. I don't agree with him on everything. And he wouldn't be my first choice. But if you then said to me, of those three, who would you vote for? It would be a lot easier. So what I said last night was, if it's just Trump and Biden, I'm not voting. But I also said last night, I don't know if there's going to be a third choice. And if there were, I would give every consideration to that third choice, because I don't want to not vote for president. I've voted for president every year of my life, going back to my first vote in 1980 when I was 18 years old for Ronald Reagan. And it's a proud moment to get to vote for president. But it would not be a proud moment for me to vote for either one of those guys. We deserve something better than 160 years old combined age from our two candidates, okay? Now my kids tell me that when I say that, I am ageist. Guilty. I'm ageist. It's too damn old on top of it. It's too old. This job is hard. And with all due respect, I've known Joe Biden for 40 years. Mary Pat and I went to the University of Delaware. We got to know him when we were students at the University of Delaware. He is a good guy. I like Joe. I really do. He's a good person. But he can't hit the fastball anymore. And it's just the way it is. Age affects everybody ultimately, and it affects different people at different pace and at different ages. I'm sure my dad is watching the live stream tonight. He's 90. He still drives. He's totally with it. He's watching the live stream tonight, and he's got a 74-year-old girlfriend. It gives hope to everyone, okay? But my father has no business being president of the United States. Despite all of those great attributes of his, no shot I want him within 5 miles of the White House. Age does matter. It does. And so that's the reason I gave the answer I gave last night. And what I'm trying to do here over the next 18 days is make sure that you don't have to make that choice between Trump and Biden. I got a feeling I know who you'd vote for. But I don't want you to have to make that choice. I want you to have to choose between me and Biden, and I want you to make your decision a little bit harder. That's what I want to be able to do, and that's why I'm doing this. And so, you know, it doesn't give me any joy to say what I said last night, although I've said it a lot of other times, so I thought people already knew it, but it got a lot of attention today, so okay. But I'm going to stand by my position, which is neither one of them deserve my vote. And as I answered to his question, I'm done voting for people who don't deserve my vote. I'm done doing it. I've seen the destruction of that. And I'm not going to give people my vote anymore who aren't worthy of it. And neither one of those guys, in my opinion, are worthy of it. Hopefully, I'll be the nominee and I get to vote for myself. That'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? I've done that a couple of times before, but it was for governor, for president. It would be very cool. And if it's not me, hopefully it's somebody that I can support. And by the way, I said this yesterday too. I could vote for Nikki if she were the nominee, and I could vote for Ron if he were the nominee. But I could, because I think they both would be better than Biden. Well, I know you disagree. Look, there you go. It wouldn't be a Christie town hall if you didn't boo me. That would be good. But so it's not like I won't vote for anybody but myself. But I have certain standards on this one, and that's what I'm going to stick with. But it's a good question, and thanks for paying attention. So, all right, so it's Friday night, it's 8:25, and snow is coming. So I'm getting the hell out of here before the snow hits, but we'll be back next week. We'll be back on Tuesday, and we'll probably be here for every day after that, between now and January 23rd. I want to end by thanking you for coming and for your really good questions and thoughtful questions. This is what this process is supposed to be about. And this is why you're all so special. Because of where you live and the fact that you show up. Because you get to do this like nobody else in the country gets to do. Maybe Iowa a little bit, but you guys get to do it at closer range than anybody else in the country. You know, if I win this thing, and many of you have probably had this experience already in your lives if you've lived in New Hampshire for a long time, you're going to be able to tell people, oh, yeah, I was like this close to the president. Yeah, I know him. We're tight. We took pictures together. He signed things for me. He came to my house. You know, you get to do things that nobody else in the country gets to do or say. With that comes a responsibility to do it right. Don't do it just by default. Don't believe whatever the polls tell you. Believe me, if the polls were right, Hillary Clinton would be in her second term. Okay? If the polls were right, Barack Obama would have never been president of the United States. He was going to lose to Hillary Clinton in 2008. If the polls were right, Mitt Romney would have been the nominee in 2008. John McCain was dead and buried when he came here to New Hampshire. And you guys revived him. And he became the nominee. It's your call. Don't let anybody tease you into anything else. It's your decision. And I'm here because I want your vote. You know, I spoke to President Bush a few weeks ago, and he was giving me advice about the race, and he said, remember something. He goes, don't ever end one of those town hall meetings without asking for the vote. He goes, people want to be asked. He goes, I know you assume that they assume that you want the vote. That's why you're there. Don't do that. Ask for the vote, man. You got to ask for the vote. And he was that emotional about it. And I said, yes, sir, Mr. President. I appreciate the advice. And he goes, yeah, why would anybody listen to me? He goes, I only won it twice. So I'm listening to you, Mr. President, and I need your vote. I want your vote on January 23rd. And I want you to know that if you give me the privilege of being the nominee, I will run a race against Joe Biden that'll be on the merits, on the issues, and I will beat him on the merits and on the issues, not on anything else, not on what happened yesterday, but what we both want for tomorrow. And if I get the honor of being President of the United States, you're going to know what I think every day. And I'm not going to stop doing this. I'm going to come back here as president. I'm going to do town hall meetings because I did over 150 of them when I was governor. And I love doing it because it kept me in touch with what people really thought. And I think you can get isolated as governor. I can't imagine how isolated you get as president. So that's the kind of president I'm going to be if you give me the chance to be it. And you all are going to be the ones who help to make that decision. So 18 days to go. Today's pretty much over, so we're down to 17. And let's make sure that you talk to as many people as you can to encourage them to be a participant, to go and vote on the 23rd, and to make a difference. If you do that, I think we're going to do just fine. And I appreciate your time tonight very much. Thank you for having me.